Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Laramie and today we are going to talk about knitting in public. I actually recorded this video as part of the video that I posted on the channel last week where I talked about my first trip to a local yarn shop. And so that video ended up being a little longer than I anticipated. So I cut out the part where we talked about knitting in public and I have pasted it into this video. So this is my future Laramie intro, and then I'll hand it back to past Laramie so that she can tell you a little bit about her thoughts on knitting in public. This topic came about because Saturday, June 14th, which was last Saturday, was Worldwide Knit in Public Day. And so I wanted to share my thoughts about knitting in public. There's things I like about knitting in public, some things that give me a little bit of anxiety about knitting in public. And then I also wanted to share just some of the places that I have knitted in public since learning how to knit. So if it seems like I'm a little tired in this video, or like you're starting in the middle of a conversation instead of at the beginning, that is why. It's because I recorded that after I had recorded about 15 to 20 minutes of footage talking about a local yarn store that I had visited. So if you missed that video, go ahead and check that out. I posted that on the channel last week. But otherwise, I'm going to hand it off to past Laramie to talk about knitting in public. Yesterday, which would be Saturday, the June 14th, was National Knit in Public Day, or Worldwide Knit in Public Day. I think it's Worldwide Knit in Public Day. I can never remember. I'll throw it up on the screen. But in honor of that, I want to talk a little bit about like the things I like about knitting in public, the things I like less or dislike about knitting in public. And I just want to tell you some funny places, or all the different places that I have knitted in public since learning how to knit about a year and a half ago. So for the most part, I really enjoy knitting in public, mostly because it gives my hands something to do and my eyes something to look at when I don't have anything else that I'm like supposed to be working on. I find it to be an enjoyable like time passer. I don't like to sit still very much, so it lets me it's good to be constantly doing something while I'm sitting and waiting. And also you can strike up conversations with some really neat people. When you're crafting, people will tend to come up to you and like talk to you and ask you about your project, and then they'll usually have something to tell you about like their projects, or maybe their grandma used to knit or something like that, or crochet or something like that. And it's a really easy way to make connections. I've never, as of yet, had anyone be anything but absolutely lovely coming up to talk to me. And it often like gives them a way to break the ice, because they might not have anything else to say and they would like to talk to somebody, but they can relate in some way, or they can be curious in some way about my knitting. And then it gives me something to talk about. And if you haven't figured it out, I do have social anxiety. And so having like something very specific that we can connect on and like talk to each other about is very useful. So that's something I really like about knitting in public. I love that it gives me something to do, and I just generally enjoy knitting. So I love that I can take it with me. I think like when I was quilting, I wish I could have just like taken my quilt supplies with me, but quilts are huge, so it wasn't that convenient. But I love that, and I love the conversations that it can start up. One thing I don't particularly like about knitting in public, and this is more just like my personal like issues to overcome, or my personal like struggles with it, is sometimes I don't know if it's socially acceptable to be knitting in certain places and at certain times. And so I can have a little anxiety about knitting because I don't know if I'm allowed to. So like there can be times where I'm literally doing nothing. I'm sitting there doing nothing, and I want to pull out my knitting that I have brought with me just in case I'm sitting there doing nothing. And I'm kind of anxious about whether or not I'm allowed to knit here. And like knitting in meetings, depending on the meeting, I will do, but there are a lot of meetings like in my like faculty group, I will not knit in those meetings because I'm so afraid that people will see it as unprofessional, or possibly think that I'm not paying attention because I am often looking at my hands when I'm knitting. I have ADHD though, so if I'm doing something with my hands and not making eye contact with you, I'm probably actually listening. Where if I'm like making eye contact with you, unless I'm super comfortable with you, I may not actually be listening. I'm probably like talking to myself, telling myself, okay, pay attention, Laramie, you gotta pay attention. Look them in the eye, pay attention. Where like if I'm knitting, I'm like really able to pay attention and listen. But in those meetings, I won't, out of fear of, making somebody think that I'm not listening to them or just not looking professional. And I think that's just like a personal block. There are some places that I'm worried that people will think that it is disrespectful to be knitting, or that it's just like not a good place to be knitting. Sometimes I worry that it's just like too much of a hassle to try to be knitting while I'm there, mostly because I can't knit without looking most of the time. But for the most part, other than my very minor, like uncomfortable things I have with knitting in public, I really do enjoy knitting in public. And lately, that's where I've been doing most of my knitting. When I'm at home, I'm usually busy. And so like, I've actually mostly been knitting in public lately. And despite the occasional situations where I'm a little bit uncomfortable or feel like maybe I shouldn't be doing it there, I do knit in public a lot. So I wanted to share all the places, or a good chunk of the places, that I have knit in public since I learned how to knit. Now, I did not knit in public for the first like 8 months that I knew how to knit. It wasn't until I was like much more confident in my knitting that I was able to take it with me. But I can't remember the first place I knitted in public, actually. Maybe it was at D&D, which isn't really public because it was a group of my friends, but having never knitted in front of anyone, it did feel like I was knitting in public. So I knit at game nights. I knit when we play D&D. I have knit at a funeral. I have knit at a wedding. I have knit at a hospital a couple of times. I've knit in meetings. I've knit at conferences. I've knit random places on campus. I knit during, like when I'm waiting to go up on stage for something, for like a student event. I knit while my students are taking exams if I'm not like actively grading something else. I knit a lot in my office when I need a break from grading, or when I just like have something I need to listen to, but I don't necessarily need to like look at it or take notes. I knit in pretty much every Zoom meeting because that's one where you can kind of hide that you're knitting, even though I don't know that anyone cares that I'm knitting, but that's a big one. I have this is not something I have personally done, but I have students that knit in class, which I love to see it because I figure that if they're knitting in class, they're probably actually paying more attention to me, and it's probably helping keep their hands and like the distractible part of their mind occupied. Where else have I knit? I've knit like walking around, not well, but I have knit walking around, and I would like to knit more while walking. I've knit in the car, not necessarily public, but like while waiting for something, I'll just be there knitting. I feel like I'm missing some. I haven't knit in any stores. Definitely knit at coffee shops and restaurants. Oh, I knitted at a baby shower the other day. I've knitted at a lot of places. I knitted at my own little birthday party gathering the other day. So yeah, I've knitted in a lot of places, and I've never had a negative interaction. In fact, at the funeral, I didn't know very many people there. It was one of my best friend's dad passed away, and so I was at his funeral, and a lot of people that I did not know, because I really only knew the immediate family, came up to me and asked me about my knitting, and like little kids came up and asked and wanted to watch and like touch. I was knitting socks, and they wanted to touch the socks, and it was really cool to like, there was this icebreaker that kind of brought us together, and what like, even the little kids were interested, and it was cool to see that. And then I got to meet some like grandparents that love to crochet or knit or make bags. So, I don't know if this is convincing you at all to craft in public, but I do really enjoy knitting and I enjoy crafting. And I think that it's like, if you want to knit in public, you should. And if you're afraid of having like a bad experience, I can tell you as of yet, even in those situations where I don't know if it's necessarily appropriate to be knitting, I've never had anybody say anything bad to me about it or even give me a sideways glance. Like everyone usually, like if they make eye contact with me or look at me at all, they smile at me or they come up and talk to me. But it's not so much that like, if you don't want to talk to people, don't just immediately assume that if you're knitting in public, they're just going to come up and talk to you. And of course, you can exchange knitting with any other craft that you can take on the go. Knitting is just the one that I do. But yeah, I think this video has been long enough. It was really cool to go to the yarn shop. That was a very fun experience. I'm very grateful for Bailey for inviting me and helping me get over that a little bit of anxiety about going. I'm going to color that block in my knitting bingo for 2025. That's one more thing done. I'm going to keep working on my stranded colorwork cowl. So next podcast episode, I'll give you an update on that. And then, you know, maybe after I finish a sweater or two, or, you know, get the inkling to cast on, I will start knitting my first colorwork sweater. But all right. If you have knit anywhere really weird in public, please let me know. I think knitting in public anywhere is a little weird and I say that in a good way. Like it's good weird. Like I love to see people crafting in the oddest places. So please let me know. Leave those below. If you want me to make a video about anything in specific, please let me know about that. Otherwise, like, subscribe if you want to hang out more, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.